let's talk about this thing called a business event. You'll remember earlier I said that one of the key principles here is simplicity. And simplicity means break it down into small pieces, partition the effort to minimize complexity. And what we're going to do is we're going to start with this thing called an event. So what is an event? We have to know what these things are so we can refer to them. An event is a circumstance, a condition, a state, if you like. A state can change, right, from hot to cold. And when a system encounters a change, such as the temperature going up, the system might be required to kick in a cooling system, for example. So they could have temperature changes. We could have directional changes. We can have elevators going up and down. These are all state changes that we could deal with, which are not usually used in business systems, but they're parts of systems. We can have external requirements or a condition or a circumstance that the system has to be able to deal with. I'm going to give you a couple of examples in a minute. Now, as an analyst, remember earlier we talked about where do we start? You know, and somebody said, at the beginning, right? Well, where's the beginning? Who's beginning, right? You know, my beginning, your beginning, that person's beginning. Who knows what the beginning is, right? Like the universe, where's the beginning there? Pick a star, right? And that's exactly what we're going to do. It doesn't matter where you start. Pick an event. If you have 20 events in a list, you might be inclined to start in some place that makes you comfortable. But quite frankly, it doesn't make any difference where you start. Sequence at this point is simply not important. Now, sequence is going to become important a little bit later on, but not now. From the point of view of business analysis, start wherever you like. Bear in mind also that when you write the event statement, it never starts with a verb. It never starts with a verb. If it starts with a verb, it's not an event. That is a condition or a circumstance or a state. If it starts with a verb, it's a process. It starts with a verb, it's like do stuff. That's not a condition or a circumstance. That's an action that's required. And we'll see the difference as we go along. So an event statement never starts with a verb. Let me say that in different words. An event statement never starts with a verb. And very, very important as we go along. All right. There are 4 flavors of business events. So let's talk about some of those 4 flavors. We have what we call a situation event, something that's not within our control, stuff that happens. You know, a shipment arrives, for example. So if it's part of your system to receive shipments from suppliers, then you might have an event such as a shipment arrives. And once you've identified that situation, that circumstance, then you might be saying, well, now that I know it's arrived, what do I want to do about it? Well, the what do I want to do about it is the actual process. Notice the action inside that. And of course, you want to remember the things you've done. What did I do? You want to remember that. When did I do it? You want to remember that. Who did I do it with? You want to remember that too, right? Such as the supplier, that is, right? Okay. We have external events based on third-party needs, what we call temporal events, and internal based on a decision. Let me give you a couple of examples. Let's say that you're working for a company that manages credit cards, Visa or American Express or MasterCard. And we all have something like that, so we can relate to it fairly easily. And let's address some of the events that there might be in a system for a company that manages credit cards, such as a customer wants to buy a product. And we can imagine a customer buying something, but that's external from us. A customer has exceeded their credit limit. Now, I don't know anything about that, but we can relate to that, right? A customer has exceeded their credit limit. Now, the interesting thing about systems is that all systems do is look up stuff. That's all they do. If we didn't have to look up stuff, we wouldn't need systems. In other words, all systems do is they look up stuff and they find things. If we didn't need to find things, we wouldn't need systems. They're the same thing, look up and find. Because I'm assuming that if we look something up, we want to find it. They seem to go together. So that's all systems do, except for research, pure research. There might be a little bit more to it in that case. Okay? So from a systems perspective, for a moment, imagine this. Imagine that I'm a software node. And of course you do know that node is the past imperfect of the verb to know. So as a software node, I need to know certain things, and I need to take some action, and I need to record things to keep track of them. Why do I need to keep track of stuff? Because I need to find it later. If I didn't need to find it, I wouldn't keep track of it. And remember, all the system does is it looks up stuff so we can find it. And that's the key to analysis. Always remember that. So, the customer has exceeded their credit limit. So the software node sits there looking for a situation. It's just polling the world of things that could happen. And it says, aha, I have found a customer who exceeds their credit limit. Now the first question the software has to say is, how do I know that the customer has exceeded their credit limit? And there's something that tells it that. It can't just sort of be looking at something that can't be identified, but they can identify it. That doesn't make any sense. There has to be a way of identifying that, and it's called data. And data can come in many different ways. There's the traditional way, which is pieces of bits and bytes, or it could be a form of time, or it could be a graphic of some kind. All these things are bits and bytes still, but it's data. Okay, so there's a piece of data, or more than one piece of data, that tells the software that this situation has occurred. A customer has exceeded their credit limit. So the system says, aha, now that I know that a customer has exceeded their credit limit, what am I going to do about it? And it says, I have some rules. Since even software has rules. And it says, this is what I'm going to do about it. And it does it, whatever it may be. And then the third item is the software says, what am I going to remember about what I've done? Well, I'm going to remember something about which customer exceeded their credit limit based on whatever action I've taken. I'm going to remember when, how much, and a bunch of other stuff. So I identify the fact that a customer has exceeded their credit limit. I do something based on whatever the rules of the game are, the process or the procedures, if you like, and I remember or record what I've done. Those are the three things. Again, why do I keep track of stuff? You know, quite often we talk about tracking systems. Very popular term for systems. What project are you working on? Well, I'm working on the, I'm working on the purple tracking system. What does that mean? It means we're going to keep track of stuff. Well, why are we keeping track of that stuff? Well, I don't know. Well, of course we know. Because we have to find it to answer certain questions. So the objective here is to keep track of stuff so as we can find it. Let's see where we go with that. So that was a system view. Let's look at it from an analyst's point of view. If you're the analyst, how do you look upon it when we have an event such that the customer requests a higher credit limit? As an analyst, I would first say, well, how? I would ask my clients, I would ask my subject matter experts, I would say, how do we know that a customer requests a higher credit limit? What tells us that they've asked for that? And my subject matter experts, my clients, are going to tell me there's something that tells us that they've asked for that, whatever it is, such as they submit an application, or they call, or they go online, whatever the situation is. And then I'm going to say, well, now that I know that a customer has requested an application, what are we going to do about that? What do you want to do about it, I would say, to the subject matter experts, to the clients. I would say, what do you want to do about somebody who, and they'd say, well, and they'd tell us all the things we want to do. And my third question as an analyst would be, okay, do you want to remember the things we've done? Do you want to remember who the customer was? Do you want to remember their request or their application? Do you want to remember the result, or the end result of that? And we keep track of these things. That's what we record, or remember, or keep track of. All those words mean exactly the same thing. So as an analyst, I've done exactly the same thing as the software has to do. In other words, when I talk about the requirements with the client or the subject matter experts from the organization, that's going to get translated into software at some point in time in a certain specific way. It's going to cover the same stuff. It's not going to be different, at least we hope not. It's going to be different. Here we have a temporal event. A customer's credit card expires. First question that I would ask is, how do we know that a customer's credit card expires? Followed by, once we do know that a customer's credit card expires, what do we want to do about it? Followed by, what do we want to keep track of or record or remember about the fact that a customer's credit card has expired, such as who's the customer and so forth. It says here it's time to increase the customer's credit limit. Now that's an interesting event, because here we had one that said the customer requests a higher credit limit, and here we have one that's time to increase the customer's credit limit. You ever got one of those notifications on your bill from one of the credit card companies, from Visa or MasterCard or Amex, that says your credit limit has now been increased by $500, for example? It's time to increase the customer's credit limit. That's interesting how that happens when we don't need it. Whereas the customer requests a higher credit limit, we do that when we need it. And there are sometimes challenges with that. Right? But there are two different types of events. It's time to increase the customer's credit limit. What I would ask the client or the subject matter expert is, how do we know that it's time to do that? How do we know? What tells us? What data do we have that tells us it's time to do that? Followed by, well, now that we know, what are we going to do about it? What are our options in terms of actions taken? Followed by, what do we want to keep track of or remember or record based on what we've done? And they have the answers to that. I don't have the answers to that. I'm the analyst, I have the questions. I might have my idea, but the odds are that it's probably wrong. I may have some kind of a really wonderful idea, but it's not my job to come up with that idea. I might plant some seeds from time to time. Have you thought about, for example, they usually say, of course we have. And I say, oh, I was just asking. But they have the knowledge. They have the expertise. That's why we call them the client, or we call them the subject matter expert. I'm the analyst, or you're the analyst, and we're expert at figuring out what the requirements are. They are expert at their business. And remember earlier that some people said, we talked about how some people say, my clients don't know what they want. Yes, they do. They know what they want. However, it's our responsibility as clients, as analysts, it's our responsibility to ask them questions in such a way that they can actually give us an answer. Asking them, what would you like, doesn't help them formulate an answer, because they're thinking, well, I thought you'd help me with that. Right? Or they'll have some abstract, very high level thought about what they like. Of course they have an idea at that point. But when we get into the details, it's our job as analysts to extract that information. And I've given you 3 sets of questions that we're going to come back to time and time and time again in everything we do. Here we have an event. The company decides to cancel the customer's credit card. First question, how do we know that the company has decided to cancel the customer's credit card? And the subject matter expert would say, well, and they'll tell us, they'll give us the answer. And we have to turn that into meaningful information as we document it. And I'm going to show you how to do that in a little while. Second question is, what do we want to do about it? There are some options, right? We've decided to cancel, but, did we really mean suspend? If so, we'll change the wording, won't we? What action do we take? Third question is, what do we want to keep track of or record or remember about what we've done? Who was involved? when we did it, and the reasons why we did it, and so forth. So as an analyst, we have to know something about how business works in general, but contrary to popular opinion, we don't have to be experts at anything except analysis. We have to be experts at finding the questions to ask, and we're going to spend more time on that. We have to be experts at being able to understand what they say, to be able to distill from the many things they say into something meaningful, to be able to interpret their words and what they mean, because lots of times, as we all know, people use words differently. Different people use the same word meaning different things. We have to be able to tell by looking at not so much their body language, in my opinion, but looking in their eyes to find out whether or not that white monkey stuff covers their eyes, which usually means that they're not quite there, right? We have to be able to reflect what they say back to them in different words, so as we can come to an agreement and be on the same page in terms of what was meant. Because they are the experts in terms of the answers. As analysts, I have to be, and you have to be, an expert at finding the right questions that are right on target, that are in context, that are not general and vague, but specific and clear. Those are the things we have to learn how to do. And we're going to do that, because you know what? It ain't that hard. Now, it takes practice. It takes practice, just like that golfer guy, right? We won't mention his name right now. The golfer guy, right? He practiced a lot. And a good analyst studies their craft, and they practice their craft. And if fortune is there for them, they'll actually have a coach and a mentor to help them as they learn how. Coaching and mentoring is not just for rookies. Don't misunderstand what I'm saying. It is for anyone who is doing something different, something new, something they haven't done before. We sometimes need a guiding hand by an expert to help us get through it. These videos that are being made right now of this course is something you can revisit over and over and over again. And I'll also be very happy to deal with it in emails, but only the good kind that you send to me about this. So remember, an event never starts with a verb. None of these statements start with a verb, because these are conditions and circumstances and situations that have to be dealt with. And we're going to come back to that many times in many different ways as we go through this.